So, this is a video that I never thought I'd make, but honestly, I'm so tired of seeing this guy on my newsfeed and my social media that I felt compelled to make a video on this. Specifically on why men are so lost in society today and why they decide to follow somebody like Andrew Tate, who I believe is really honestly the epitome of a weak man, and I'll explain why. I know this is a really polarizing topic and that I'm gonna get a lot of strong opinions, but fuck it, I'm just gonna speak my mind. I'm just gonna start by explaining why Andrew Tate is not a real man. And honestly, one of the biggest red flags of his false sense of masculinity is actually his treatment and his views towards women. If you listen to his views on women in any of the videos that he talks about them, you'll realize that he sees women as objects. He uses women, and he very openly acknowledges this as a means to an end. And he's done some really disturbing things, such as pimping women out and sex trafficking them online. And honestly, the most insane part of all of this is he doesn't see anything wrong with this. He actually feels like he's doing these women some sort of service by commoditizing them and making money off of them. That's probably the only thing that you really need to know about this guy is what a scumbag this guy is. And I think it's really interesting that so many people excuse his behavior and actually look up to him. And I think it's ironic that his fan base thinks he's so good with women because he slept with a lot of them, where the actual reality is he can't even hold down a relationship because women are just repelled by him. He also has this sense of bravado, right? Of showing off materialistically, really peacocking in the animal kingdom term. And he does this by showing off his however many cars he owns or what's the color of your Bugatti. And he's built his entire image off of this materialistic fame that he thinks is what makes him a man. And really the nail in the coffin for me is really just his level of lack of self-awareness. He's built himself up to be this guy that has no weaknesses, no insecurities, no emotions, and he's just this stoic rock. And you can actually see this if you've ever watched his interview with psychotherapist David Sutcliffe, where the therapist actually asks him, do you have any insecurities? And he goes into this like mental defense mode, trying to logic his way out of the conversation. And in one of his other interviews, I think somebody asked him like, have you ever cried? Like, do you ever cry? And he said something like, tears came out of my eyes, but I did not cry. Like, brother, that is crying. I think it's really interesting how much emotional intelligence this man lacks and how honestly afraid he is to show any sort of vulnerability. And I think it's a little bit scary because a lot of men worship him. A lot of men look up to him. So I'm not gonna make this entire video on Andrew Tate, but I do want to ask and answer the question, why do men feel so lost today? And why are they drawn to figures like Tate? And really there are so many things going on, but I'm gonna give you my point of view as a man growing into today's society. And I really do think that it has to do with the changing of the times, right? That there are new, societal expectations, there's new sort of pressures on men today and new challenges that older generations just did not have to deal with. It's my belief that society has failed a lot of men, a lot if not most men. And the reason I say that is because there's really a lack of truly positive male role models in the world. And nobody has taught men how to be men. Right? We've all forgotten the art of masculinity. True masculinity, okay, as opposed to fake masculinity. I think a lot of men get lost with their masculine identity because they feel so much pressure from the outside world, right? Especially when people tell them that, oh, if you act this way, you're displaying toxic masculinity traits, right? If you act aggressive in certain situations, this is bad. Like you should repress all of that. And I think a lot of men are tired of hearing those messages, and that's really what sparks them to find and are attracted to people like Tate because he doesn't give a shit. I think a lot of men feel powerless because they feel that they are up against this race with inflation, with the careers, with financial pressures, and they just can't get ahead in life no matter how hard they try. And most men feel lost because they don't even know what they want in life. They hear all these messages, right, from their family, from their parents, from society, from people that are telling them what to do on social media. And they don't even know how to craft a life for themselves. Most men feel a lot of pressure outside, right, telling them that they should get a career, right, start making good money, right, have a family, take care of kids, raise kids. and all this mixed message bullshit that confuses young men today. And it's no surprise that they turn to social media, right? They turn to video games, they turn to porn, and they feel this social isolation. And then when they see a polarizing figurehead like Andrew Tate, they feel drawn to him because he has a strong message. He has these strong beliefs that most men lack in their lives. And I think where this stems from is a lack of tribes, and it's a lack of community, right? It's a lack of a shared brothership that most men have, because most men, in all honesty, they feel isolated. And that isolation is dangerous. And that's really sad, because if you look back even just like a couple hundred, even a couple thousand years ago, we all lived in societies where men had this shared connection to brotherhood. It's this lost sense of shared connectedness and shared brotherhood that men have with each other that is really the root cause, I believe, of all of this. And I want to speak a little bit more about the rise of these harmful stereotypes of men when it comes to toxic masculinity and how it's perpetuated by, media influence. A lot of men today are shamed into repressing their, level of aggression and assertiveness because it's deemed a bad quality, right? It's deemed as being toxic. And I'm not saying if you're a guy, go out there and be violent and be aggressive and, assert yourself and dominate other people. But there is something to be said about expressing these natural, right, 100% natural, 100% human tendencies in a positive way, in a healthy way, that for some reason is still being looked down upon and labeled toxic. And I think a lot of men are tired of that sort of messaging, which is why they choose to follow somebody like Tate, who is completely on the opposite side of that pendulum. And I really think that most men are tired of being painted as, being bad. And I think Andrew Tate is really just a voice for them, right? Albeit a very loud and obnoxious one to truly just express how they feel. And I'll be honest, there are some things that I do admire about Tate, right? Number one is he is quite generous with his money. I saw a clip that he paid this young kid $10,000 to cut his hair. And I like the fact that he has a strong opinion and he's not afraid to express that. But where he goes wrong and where he leads so many men astray is his definition of masculinity and what he thinks it means to be a true man. So I'm gonna share my thoughts on what I think it means to be a true man. Number one, vulnerability is not a weakness, it is a strength. Emotional vulnerability, putting yourself out there, right? Having your feelings out in the open, not just keeping them in, that is a hard thing to do. That is a hard thing to do for most people, especially men. If it's a hard thing to do, why the fuck is it a weakness? Don't you think it should be a strength? It's really such a shame in today's society because I see so many examples of guys that I've grown up with and, even in my own personal experience that, expressing any sort of vulnerability, right? Expressing any form of, highly charged emotion means that you're a weak man, right? It means that there's something wrong with you. And if you cry, which is such a natural expression of grief and sadness and these deep emotions, that means you're not a real man because you shed some tears. It's fucking stupid. It's fucking ridiculous. I think weak men are the ones that are afraid to express these sort of emotions. They're afraid that they're gonna be judged. They're afraid about what others are gonna think about them. And I think that comes from a deep place of insecurity. Because at one point in their lives, right, probably in childhood, either their dad or their grandpa or a father figure or a masculine figure that they looked up to told them that, hey, if you cry, you're not a real man. And this has been true in my own experience. So my dad died when I was 12. And for the longest time, I held in all of that grief, I held in all of that sorrow because I was afraid that if I cried, that I showed any sort of weakness, that people would judge me for it. So I held on to all that internal tension, and boy, was my life miserable. Like I wanted to cry, I wanted to let it go and let it out so badly. But because I felt this pressure from, my peers, just externally from society, I couldn't be able to express that fully. And when I actually did, my God, was it such a relief. My God, how long had I been holding that in for? It had been years. So when I think of a real manly man, when I think of a true masculine person, a true masculine leader, I think about somebody who wears their heart on their sleeve, who's not afraid to have emotional depth, who's not afraid to cry, who's not afraid to feel these feelings and be vulnerable. And also to not be afraid of embracing their feminine side, right? The caring, the nurturing, the loving, the emotional expressions. It befuddles me because I'm sure there are some men out there that think they're gonna either turn gay or become a woman if they embrace these feminine aspects of themselves. And a true man is a leader, first and foremost to himself, and also to women, and also to other men. You'll never hear a real man talk down on anybody, especially women. Real men protect women. That's their job. They don't pimp them out. They don't sex traffic them. They don't see them as objects. So think about what kind of person somebody is when they make half the human race as something less than. I want to speak a little bit more about the leadership aspect of what it means to be a man. So I mentioned that a real man takes leadership, right? Especially over themselves first and foremost. Because self-leadership is the most important thing that you can do as a man. And what that means is overall taking care of yourself. Taking care of yourself physically, whether that means going to the gym, right? Going on a run, taking care of your health or your physical health, and also taking care of your mental health, right? And taking care of your spiritual health. There's this ridiculous, stupid stigma around therapy, right? If you go to the therapist, if you see a therapist, that means you're crazy or you're not a man enough. That's fucking stupid. Going to therapy is one of the greatest gifts that you can give to yourself, right? As a man and honestly as a human being. And most guys won't do it because they're afraid. They're afraid of being judged. They're afraid of being labeled crazy. They're afraid that going to therapy means that they're weak or they're broken or something is wrong with them. None of that is true. But we all have these stories that we tell ourselves because of society, and it's one of the most frustrating things ever. And also, a really great man practices humility and humbleness. He doesn't need to flaunt. He doesn't need to show off. He doesn't need to peacock. And all of that is just a defense against some deeper insecurity that they're unwilling to face. And real men do hard shit. Real men are not afraid to have difficult conversations with other people, but especially with themselves. They're not afraid to look deep within and conquer their fears and face their demons and befriend them. And even if they are afraid, they do it anyways, because it's scary and the obstacle is the way. So that's my wrap for today. I know this is gonna be a very polarizing video, but guess what? I don't care. In the comments below, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you have another view, if you have another opinion, I'm all ears. I wanna get this conversation going because it's something that us men need to talk about. And if you like what I have to say, like this video and subscribe for more.